Namaste, Hari Om, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Pranams from the Param Vedanta group. Today we will be discussing second chapter of Bhagvadgita. So as it has been depicted here, this chapter we have divided into three parts. The first part, which consists of Jnana Yoga level 1, I will be discussing, myself Dr. Netra, followed by Karma Yoga, that will be delivered by Dr. Sunderaj, Ellur. And finally, Jnana Yoga Asthita Prajna will be rendered by Sanjay Mehrotra. So before we begin chapter 2, to capture the message of chapter 1 that was discussed in the last class in a nutshell, the problem of samsara was presented. Traditionally, teaching happens as a samvada between teacher and student. So the teaching between Shishya and Guru was introduced. This work is part of Mahabharata. The context of Gita is introduced on the background of Kurukshetra war. The most able archer is down on his knees because of emotional problem. So what we need to know is how much ever most qualified each one of us are, we need this wisdom now and not when we go through adversities. So before Krishna commences the Gita teaching, Arjuna goes through 7 stages. 4 stages were already covered in the first chapter as shown in the slide. So we see the initial part of this chapter that he goes through 3 more stages. To recollect the 4 stages, initially one is unaware of samsara, which is hidden and brought to the fore when Krishna confronts Arjuna to Bhishma and Drona. When the second stage pours out in the form of raga, shoka, moha. Then third stage, which is intense longing that happens and Arjuna tries on his own to sort out the emotional problems. Because of moha or delusion, he arises at a wrong conclusion that even though he is a Kshatriya warrior, he should flee. This is Viparyaya stage. Fortunately for him, as we see in the beginning of this chapter, he goes through self-doubt, samshaya, which is the 5th stage and soon manifests as helplessness or karpanyam, which is the 6th stage, and culminates in surrender, which is sharanagati. So with this, the soldier Arjuna becomes student and charioteer Krishna becomes Jagat Guru and paves the way for teaching from the 11th verse of this second chapter until the 18th chapter. A question might arise. Arjuna is a close relative and his friend is in distress. Krishna has the most potent medicine which can wipe out any sorrow. Yet, Krishna does not teach. Why? Because, first of all, Arjuna was not yet emotionally exhausted. He had preconceived notions and he had not yet surrendered. So, the first verse starts with Sanjaya describing how Arjuna, overcome by grief, attachment, his eyes are filled with tears. He has dropped his bow and arrow and is sitting silently. So whenever we take a wrong decision and develop a doubt, taking correct decision results in knowledge. Similarly, Viparyaya, moha or delusion results in samshaya and correction of this results in jnanam. Thus, we pass from tamoguna to rajoguna and sattvaguna. Arjuna is down on his knees in the battlefield, struck with grief, and Krishna uses strong words such as kashmalam, impurity. Here it is not physical impurity, but mental impurity in the form of depression, dejection, extreme frustration, anaryajishtam, not a noble person, not a cultured person. Asvargyam, adharmic, will not give punyam. Akirtikaram, not only it will not give swarga after death, even while being alive, it will not give you name or ill fame. Klaibyam, unmanliness, weak-mindedness, incapable of taking courageous decision. Kshudram, hrudaya durbalyam, weak-heartedness, faint-heartedness, a lowly person. So you can see Krishna chides using these strong words to literally wound Arjuna. These are meant to emotionally exhaust Arjuna so that the teaching can start on a clean slate. Arjuna is literally immersed in the Viparyaya stage, and the same wrong conclusion continues. He does not see himself as the Kshatriya whose Swadharma is to correct the Adharma in the society. Instead, he sees the wrongdoers as his close relatives. How can I fight with Bhishma? How can I fight with Drona? He says. I would better take to begging instead of having the papam of killing my gurus in my hands. So the 6th verse is a huge turning point where Arjuna has a doubt on his wrong conclusion that he has to flee the war. Normally, doubt is not good, but when you're doing something wrong, doubt is definitely a great savior. The doubt he expresses is whether we should win or they should win. The 7th verse is an important verse when Arjuna surrenders. With my mind overpowered by helplessness and with my intellect completely deluded regarding righteousness, I ask you, decidedly tell me, O Krishna, that which is good for me. I am your disciple. Teach me who have surrendered to you. Here, Arjuna expresses that he is confused. What is dharma? What is adharma? I am unable to think. My intellect is clouded. Kindly, O Krishna, tell me what is correct. I am surrendering to you. Guide me correctly. It's a crucial shloka where Arjuna the soldier becomes Arjuna the disciple and Krishna the charioteer becomes Krishna the Gita-charya. Kindly give me a systematic teaching and not a mere preaching what is to be done at this time. The idea is that at the end of the Gita teaching, we are able to resolve conflicts on our own effort and not depend on anyone or anything. So this slide depicts the various stages or the quality of a student who goes through all the stages, and importantly, he should surrender to the teacher to receive the teaching without having any preconceived notions or being judgmental. These qualities of a guru are being described mainly in one word in this slide. Prahasanna means in the midst of such emotional upheavals, Krishna is still cheerful. This is also depicted in the Ramayana when Lakshmana grieves the loss of Sita and Rama remains smiling. Meaning, Krishna is unaffected by the problem of samsara the way Arjuna is affected. Why? Because he is Jagat Guru, rich in the knowledge of Gita, Atma Vidya. Pujya Swami Paramarthanandaji structures the Krishna's teachings from 4 different angles, which are philosophical, practical, ethical, and worldly angles. But what we need to remember is the central theme of this Gita is the philosophical argument, which starts from verse 11 to 25. And this is the highest philosophical teaching in not just Gita, but the entire Advaita Vedanta. Thus, starts the glorious teaching of the Gita from the next verse. Gita teaching begins with the 11th verse where Lord Krishna has condensed the entire Gita Shastram. The Lord said, "You're grieving for those who should not be grieved for. At the same time, you're speaking the words of the wise people. Wise men do not grieve for the dead and for the living." The philosophical teaching goes by other names: Atma Vidya, Adhyatma Drushti, Atma Anatma Viveka, Jnana Yoga. This is an important verse that condenses the entire Gita Shastra. Self-ignorance is the cause of all human problems, and self-knowledge is the solution to all problems. Wise men do not grieve over the past, present, or future. Wise men also do not grieve over the dead or living. So to whom do you belong, Arjuna? Asks Krishna. Every living being is a combination of consciousness and body-mind complex or matter. Consciousness is that which gives sentiency to the body-mind complex, comparable to the light principle. When we take the example of a light on our hand, Light pervades the body and makes the body visible. When you're seeing the hand, you're seeing two things. One is the hand, other is the light. It is intimately on the hand, but is not a feature or a product or a property of the hand. So, correlating this, the 5 features of consciousness or Atma is, it's not a part, product, or property of the body. It's an independent entity, all pervading, eternal, and not manifest because of a lack of manifesting medium. Spiritual sadhana is shifting our identification from anatma body to atma, shifting the identification from mortality to immortality. Asatoma sadgamaya, tamasoma jyotirgamaya, mrityorma amritam gamaya, om shanti, shanti, shanti. Lead us from unreal to real, from ignorance to knowledge. This is just like the Drushya Viveka concept. So basically what this concept says is, whatever I experience is an object of experience and I am the subject. So what we have to remember is, if I'm experiencing something, it is an object. So I experience the world, it's an object, it's not me. I experience body, it's an object, not me. I experience mind, it's an object, not me. I am the experiencer, the consciousness principle. It is this Atma Krishna is talking about. Krishna reveals some of the important features of this Atma. That is, Atma is ever the subject, never an object of experience. Aprameya, ever the experiencer, never the experienced object. Like the camera. When camera is taking the picture of everything, we'll never be there in the picture. But even though it is not in the picture, it does not mean that we require the proof of the existence of the camera. The second feature that Krishna talks about is Nitya. Atma is eternal. Sometimes in Vyakta Rupam and sometimes in Avyakta Rupam. If you remember the light, when the hand is there, it is visible form. Hand is removed, it is invisible form. So, second is Nitya. Third feature is Nirvikara, changeless. Fourth feature, Sarvagata, all pervading. That means there is no boundary, spatial boundary. Then the next two features to be taken together, and which is one of the most important feature which Krishna repeatedly emphasizes, Akarta, Abhokta. It does not do any action, therefore it does not reap any result. Atma is Satyam, the consciousness principle. So this does not mean that each one is separate from the other. These are the 7 features of Atma brought about in this chapter. So in the philosophical angle, what Krishna conveys is, Arjuna, you're not killing Bhishma, the Atma, Drona, the Atma. So why do you worry about the death of Bhishma, death of Drona? Because none of them are killed. And not only Bhishma and Drona are not killed, you're not a killer also, because Arjuna, the Atma, is Akarta. Therefore, it cannot kill anyone. So Arjuna, the Atma, is not a killer. Bhishma, the Atma, is not killed. Therefore, why are you crying? This is the philosophical argument. The philosophical approach is Sarvam Atma Mayam Jagat. And Krishna will point out that Atma, which is Swarupam, of the nature of consciousness, is neither a Karta nor a Bhokta. And therefore, there is no question of anybody killing or anybody being killed. It is just shifting the vision. When you look at a pot as a pot, you talk about the origin of the pot and destruction of the pot. But once you shift the vision and learn to see it as nothing but clay, then from your vision, clay was there before, in the middle with a particular shape, and then when it is broken, nothing is lost because clay continues to be there. Therefore, from the standpoint of pot vision, birth and death is there. From the standpoint of clay, there is no birth or death. So the philosophical angle says that as an Atma, you're Akarta, Abhokta. So you're not killing. And as Arjuna, the Atma is also Akarta. then why we need to have our body? Accept the nature of anatma, as there is no choice. When you don't accept and show resistance, you develop sorrow. Increase your mental endurance, titiksha. Oh Lord, give me the strength to change what can be changed. Give me the strength to accept what cannot be changed. Give me the wisdom to know the difference between what can be changed and what cannot be changed. So when we look at the practical angle, whoever dies is reborn and whoever is born dies again. There is no destruction. It's only manifestation and unmanifestation. So do not grieve. From the ethical angle, you're killing someone for dharma samstapanam. It is not wrong. It's your dharma to fight, your duty bound to fight. You win, you enjoy. You die, you will go to Swarga. So do not grieve. From the worldly angle, people will laugh at you that you ran away. They will not realize that you were having consideration because they were your relatives. So do not lose name, fame, self-respect, social status. So with this, we finish the various ways Krishna is trying to make Arjuna fight, and also how Lord Krishna has given us the nectar of Jnana Yoga for self-knowledge. So in conclusions of the first level of Jnana Yoga, what we have learned is samsara consists of raga, shoka, moha. Being ignorant, we only wallow in these three and not reach our full potential. Self-ignorance is the cause of all human problems. Self-knowledge is the solution to all problems, and that is provided by Gita. A teacher, guru, is important for us in the pursuit of knowledge. He's like the lighthouse that guides us in the ocean of samsara. It is important for us to improve our mental endurance, titiksha, so that we are mentally strong. And when we have problems in our lives, though we may have a momentary setback, we need to bounce back, reduce the latency to get back, and try to find solutions or accept the situation and go ahead in life. So you can see that Jnana Yoga is not easy. It's a steep climb. And Krishna goes one level lower to explain the importance of Karma Yoga in our day-to-day life, which equips us towards the path of Aham Brahmasmi. This will be explained by Dr. Sundar. Namaste. Thank you.
Hari Om, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. So we can see that this chapter is structured in three portions, and Karma Yoga is sitting in the middle. It serves two purposes. Now, Arjuna is become defunct as a soldier, unable to perform in the middle of the war. Lord Krishna gave the ultimate solution as Jnana Yoga, but as Netra mentioned, it's a steep climb. Karma Yoga becomes a stepping stone to Jnana Yoga. But until that happens, it also offers Arjuna a temporary solution to manage the sorrow and to take to the unpleasant situation, which is to wage war against his teachers and his relatives. I wish to draw attention to see that there are verses pertaining to Karma Yoga in almost all the chapters of the Gita. And one might wonder why this is so. And I shall try to explain through this slide. It might sound to be a busy slide. You can later probably pause the recorded video and go through all the contents. But I would like to draw attention to the row which is colored blue here. We can see that the same concept of Karma Yoga is covered across the chapters of the Gita from different perspectives. We see that the earlier chapters of the Gita, Karma Yoga concept is covered from the perspective of the seeker. What type of a seeker he is, and what sadhana does he take to. And as you see across the other end of this blue stripe, you will see that towards the more advanced chapters of the Gita, the same concept is looked at from the perspective of the type of appreciation of God that this seeker has. So therefore, across the Gita, from these various perspectives, you will have verses which pertain to the Karma Yoga. And you will be surprised that the chapter 11 completely encompasses Karma Yoga from the perspective of the appreciation of God that this seeker has. With so much importance given to Karma Yoga across all the chapters that I showed in the previous slide, one might wonder, is the Bhagavad-Gita a Karma Shastra? Is it a Dharma Shastra? You would be surprised to know how much pains Adi Shankaracharya takes in his Bhashyam to falsify Jnana Karma Samuchaya. The primary teaching of the scriptures is Jnanat Eva Kaivalyam, Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya. This darshanam or this vision, which Adi Shankaracharya calls as Samyak Darshanam, or the right vision, is what is professed by Advaita Vedanta. What this means to say is, in the final analysis, one sees Brahman alone in the disguise of so many things. Brahman alone is everything, doesn't have as reality as much as Brahman. So Adi Shankaracharya says, if you don't have this kind of Samyak Darshanam, you are as good as blind. So we see that Jnanam occupies the primary position. So Gita is a Moksha Shastra. What then is the role of Karma Yoga? This can beautifully be seen by these steps which are there in any of our old temples. So Karma Yoga forms a stepping stone for the ultimate, which is Jnana Yoga. Pujya Swami Paramarthananda ji gives this statement so often: without Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga is impossible. That is, to take to that step of Jnanam, Karma Yoga becomes an important prerequisite. And the second part is also true. Without Jnana Yoga, Karma Yoga is incomplete. Meaning to say, don't stop at Karma Yoga. Take that additional step. Only then is the teaching of the Gita complete. So this gives a perspective where Karma Yoga stands in the Gita. I wish to draw a comparison between the Karma Yoga in the earlier chapters of the Gita versus Karma Yoga in the later chapters of the Gita. So I said that it is a stepping stone for the final journey of Jnana Yoga. So in the earlier chapters, Karma Yoga is studied from the perspective of the seeker and the sadhana that one takes. So Ishvara Arpana Bhava and Ishvara Prasada Buddhi, which we will be studying a little later, these then form the stepping stone as sadhanas to the next level of sadhana, which is Nididhyasanam. When we study Karma Yoga concept in the later portion of the Gita, in the 10th and the 11th chapter, you will see that the same stepping stone is there. The appreciation of the nature of God is Vishvarupa Ishvara, which then progresses to Arupa Ishvara. I'll explain this a little more. In the earlier chapters, when we say Karma Yoga is Ishvara Arpanam and Ishvara Prasada, one does not have a concept of what Ishvara are you talking about. Is it my Ishtadevata? What is that Ishvara? That concept gets completely crystallized, clear, by the time the 10th and the 11th chapter are over. When you come to know that everything is divine. So unless I have my concept of appreciation of God, that everything surrounding me, in fact, by the conclusion of the 11th chapter, Krishna goes to the extent to prove that even the not so nice things in this world are also divine. So only when I have that concept of totality everything around me as being divine, then only I can completely imbibe in Ishvara Arpanam and Ishvara Prasada. Therefore, the later parts of the Gita they complement the earlier chapters to bring to fore the correct understanding of the Karma Yoga. And by the time the 11th chapter is over, your understanding of Karma Yoga is so good that you are now ready to dive into the Jnana Yoga, which then take off from the 12th, 13th, 14th, and 15th chapters of the Gita. Another comparison. What is the relation of Karma Yoga verses in the 2nd chapter to the 3rd chapter, which is now going to come, which is titled itself as Karma Yoga? So we'll now soon see that Karma Yoga is right action and right attitude. The right attitude part is well covered in the 2nd chapter, which we're studying today, whereas the right action part is going to come in the 3rd chapter. With this bird's eye perspective of the Gita, the Karma Yoga in the Gita, now let us dwell on the fundamentals. So, Karma Yoga, 2 words. Karma is right action and yoga is right attitude. So this is very fundamental and it should be always available to us even in the middle of the night. Right action is that action which is beneficial to the maximum number of people. What is right attitude? Right attitude itself is divided into 2 portions. Right attitude to the action and right attitude to the result of action. So far we are used to thinking that Karma Yoga is mere action alone. Gita brings this concept of Karma Yoga, means that not just the act is important, the motive with which that act is done also becomes important. Therefore comes this right attitude to the act and right attitude to the result. What is the right attitude to the act? This is beautifully described as Ishvara Arpana Bhava. Whatever I do, can I do it as an offering to him? Can I do this with a perception that I am an instrument in his hands? This is born out of tremendous gratitude that I have for God Almighty, because he has blessed me with so many things in my life without me asking for them. If I am doing something as Ishvara Arpanam, as a submission at his feet, obviously I will be putting in my 100%. If I am doing all my chores as Ishvara Arpanam, for me, that attitude of Arpanam becomes more important than the particular act itself. Therefore, I will stop picking and choosing, saying this is a nice thing I want to do, this is a little boring thing I want to do. I will do everything with the similar enthusiasm. Therefore, this attitude of Ishvara Arpana Bhava brings equanimity at the level of the act, because I do everything with the same enthusiasm, because every work is God's work. In short, right attitude to action is one of telling thank you to God every time I have an opportunity to do an act. And it is also excellence at everything I do, because everything is God's work. Let's now see what is the right attitude to the results that accrue to the act. This is defined as Ishvara Prasada Bhava. Whatever be the material result to the act that we perform, through the verses of the Gita, Lord Krishna has promised us that if you do the act with the attitude of Karma Yoga, then you are blessed with Chitta Shuddhi or purity of mind. So we should be very clear that whatever be the material result, there is little by little spiritual growth that is happening to us as soon as we start doing the same act, not as karma, but as Karma Yoga. Look at this wonderful thing. If we have this attitude, there is no failure. Even a failure is a successful failure. Why is that so? Whatever be the material result, which has become now subservient, I am having inner growth or spiritual growth promised by Lord Krishna. Therefore, there is no failure for a karma yogi. In every experience, I learn. This attitude also brings about equanimity. Equanimity now is at the level of the attitude to the results that accrue. I do not compare and contrast one result to another. I accept every result as the prasada coming from the Lord. Therefore, there is equanimity. And when we say we accept as a prasada, we cheerfully accept. There is no muttering and resistance. In short, the right attitude to the results of action is yes. Yes means I am willing to accept whatever comes my way. So in summary, what is karma yoga? It is right action, which should benefit to the maximum people. And it is the right attitude to action, which is Ishvara Arpana Bhava. It is excellence for him. It is saying thank you at every instance that I do some action. And right attitude to result is Ishvara Prasada Bhava. It is acceptance from him with a smile, is yes at every time we do any action. With this background of the understanding of Karma Yoga, now let us look at the important verses in this section. So these are the transition verses in the chapter when Lord Krishna is stepping down from Jnana Yoga to Karma Yoga. And you can see in this verse 39, the promise that Lord Krishna makes. Karma bandham prahasyasi. If you take to Karma Yoga, you will be freed from the bondage of karma. Karma without Karma Yoga causes bondage. You are addicted to the act or you are addicted to a particular result. And it also causes punyam papam, so it causes punarjanma. Whereas this way of life of Karma Yoga has the ability to free us from this bondage. Then we move on to some of the verses here where Lord Krishna glorifies Karma Yoga. He contrasts a karmi from a karma yogi, meaning a person who does not follow Karma Yoga to a person who follows Karma Yoga. There are verses where there is critical analysis of those who don't follow Karma Yoga. All this is a way of pushing us to leave behind karma and take to Karma Yoga way of life. Again here, you can see there is never a failure of result, no adverse result. Look at the line in the 40th verse. Na iha abhikramanasha asti pratyavaya na vidyate. There is no failure for a karma yogi. Such a categorical statement from Lord Krishna. Now, this verse, which Swamiji calls as the principle of Karma Yoga, is also the most popular verse in the Gita. I think I missed a verse, sorry. So we now go to this verse, which is called as the foundation verse of the Karma Yoga. Lord Krishna is telling Atmavan, be alert. Be alert regarding what? So if you have seen, Traigunya Vishaya Veda. So the Vedas have 3 gunas with the help of which one can accomplish material results. Further, Lord Krishna says in this verse, Nirdvandva. If you take to accomplishing material results through the verses which are there in the Veda Purva Bhaga, one then is in samsara. There is a roller coaster ride of joy and sorrow. This pair of opposites, the joy and sorrow and similar, are what is called as dvandva. And yoga kshema, again going by the material accomplishments, one is all the time trying to earn and accumulate, yoga and shema. This keeps one busy without any time for spirituality. So what Lord Krishna is telling is, take to the karma yoga way of life. let the spiritual accomplishments be more important. Not that material accomplishments are not, but let them be subservient to the spiritual accomplishments. So then we come to this important verse, which Swamiji describes as the principle of Karma Yoga, and also one of the most popular verses in the Gita. So we have seen in the previous slide that Kamya Karma, where one is doing karma for material results, and Prayaschitta Karma, which is activities done to do away some negative result. These have been asked to be given up. So that is reflected in this line, Ma Phaleshu Kadachana. Don't go for material results. So the previous verse also said, instead of going to the material results, go for spiritual results. So one then gets a doubt, should I drop all karma? Mate sangostva karmani. Lord Krishna clearly says, don't drop karma. So what is said is, don't go for karmas which give material result, but instead take to the karma yoga way of life. By that, one can get purity of mind, and that allows one to go ahead in our spiritual journey. Karmanevadhikarahte. So we have right to take to karma yoga way of life alone. Don't take to karma solely for material goals. That is the message in this verse. Then comes these two important verses, which Swamiji says are the first and the second definition of Karma Yoga. So the first definition of Karma Yoga is Samatvam Yoga Uchyate, or Karma Yoga is equanimity. Why Karma Yoga is equanimity? We have seen earlier that Ishvara Arpana Bhava gives equanimity at the level of my attitude to my act, and Ishvara Prasada Bhava gives equanimity at the level of the attitude to the result. The second definition is Yoga Karmasu Kaushalam. So yoga is skill in action. What it means to say is, a person who is doing the same act without karma yoga gets bonded in karma, whereas the same act, if a person is doing with the attitude of karma yoga, he is freed from bondage and he grows spiritually. So this is the choice or the discretion, kaushalam, the choice or the discretion that a seeker has. So the same act, if you take to as karma yoga, then it will take you further in our spiritual journey. Whereas if you take to as karma, you will remain stagnant. So this section ends with these set of staircase verses or stepladder verses. So these are again a kind of advertisement that Lord Krishna is doing by saying, please take to karma yoga, then you are promised higher spiritual things later, subsequently. So I will stop my presentation here and I'll hand over to Sanjay, Dr. Sanjay Mehrotra, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Sundar. That was a wonderful analysis and very comprehensive expression. And I find myself belittled a bit, thinking that the kind of understanding Dr. Sundar has about Bhagavad-Gita. Both Dr. Netra and Dr. Sundar have expressed wonderfully about the first two parts, and I'm going to talk about the Sthita Prajna part as well as the Gyan Yoga part. So I will start sharing my screen here. So let me see. Can you see my screen?
Yes,
yes, we can see your screen clearly.
Okay, so let me maximize it. So after that wonderful presentation by Dr. Sundara and Dr. Netra, I'm going to talk about the Sankhya Yoga that most important part in the second chapter, which is the Sthit Prajna part. And as an introduction, all of us have known that the Sankhya Yoga, or the second chapter, is the most important chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Some important questions which an intelligent mind should and must ask or inquire are following. What is my real nature? Who am I? What happens to us when we die? What is that ultimate reality from which everything has come? And what is this universe made up of? If you look at the science of all this, the most important question asked, the 10 most important questions which are asked in the scientific community, the first question is, what is this universe made up of? The problem is that there are very few who will ask these questions, and Upanishad gives an opinion. The Kathopanishad talks about it and was very aptly quoted by Swami Vivekananda. Uttishta Jagrat Prapya Varanni Bodhat Churasya Dhara Nishita Durattaya Durgam Athastako Kavayo Vadanti. Arise, awake, find out the great ones and learn from them. For sharp as a razor's edge, hard to traverse, difficult of going is that path, says the sages. Now, what is that by knowing which everything is known is another very important verse, which is aptly quoted in Mundaka Upanishad. Chaunuko have mahashalo angirasah vidivat upasanna prapaksha kasminno bhagavo vijñate sarva idam vijñatam bhavati. Which means Shaunaka, the great house lord, came to Angirasa in due way of a disciple and asked of him, Lord, by knowing what does all that is become known? So what is that knowledge by knowing which everything is known is a very important question which a human has to ask. Now, when you go to Vedanta Vichara, that knowledge which informs you about is the most important knowledge. And where you get that knowledge? You get that knowledge from Guru Shastra Upadesha or Vedanta Vichara. And there are 3 steps which are important for this. A guru or a shastra would provide knowledge or information, which is called a shravanam. This is the first stage. Once the knowledge is understood, and then one questions its validity and does some introspections, this is the second stage. So most of us as seekers are probably in the mananam stage. We have heard enough, and I think we have introspected reasonably enough. Now the third stage, which is called as nididhyasanam, is the most important step. And it is a very personal step. Nobody can understand what is the state of mind of a seeker who has done enough shravanam, who has done enough mananam, and now he is in the state of nididhyasanam. Now, how do you know? How do you do nididhyasanam? You have to do some kind of a sadhana or meditation. And this whole process of doing that is called as Jnana Yoga. So when you have heard Shravanam, Mananam, Nididhyasanam, you are doing Jnana Yoga. You're trying to know, you're trying to understand, and then trying to practice. This whole concept, this process is called as Jnana Yoga. But to reach this stage, as we have already gone through some understanding, that one has to be a karma yogi. Once you are a karma yogi, you become an adhikari to obtain the knowledge. This is the first step. But who is a karma yogi? And this was just described by Dr. Sundar, who has achieved the efficiency in his work, yogasu karmasu kaushalam. And he's not attached to the results of action because all his actions are done with an attitude of Ishvara Prasada Bhava and Ishvara Arpana Bhava. Now, what are the results of all this or these processes? Arjuna poses this question to Krishna. And the question is, and so what happens to this who is now a karma yogi? And the verse says, 51st verse says, Karmajam buddhi yukta hi phalam tyaktva manishina janma bandha vinurmukta padam gachat namayam. Having given up the result born of action, karma yogis become wise. So once you have got the results of your action out of your requirement, you are now freed from the bondage of birth. Verily, they attain that goal which is free from evil. This is the meaning of this verse. Now, and then Krishna now mentions what happens to a karma yogi who has obtained this knowledge. And Krishna says, Yadate moha kalilam buddhir vyatit tarishyati tadagantasi nirvedam shrotavasya shrutasya cha. When your intellect goes beyond the mist of delusion, then you will attain dispassion towards what is yet to be heard and what is already heard by you. Now, this is a very important word, the word moha kalilam, or the mist of delusion. And what is this delusion? And this is a very important aspect of our learning. It is very easy to understand the knowledge which is provided by the Shastras, like the Bhagvadgita or Upanishad. A sharp mind would grasp the information, but what happens when he comes back to the world or samsara? Gita class is over. You go back to the world, you are back with your usual individual self. But when you go beyond this delusion, that kalilam, which means I go beyond my dehatma buddhi. I am not this body-mind complex. This is the most important teaching of all Vedic Shastras, all Vedantic Shastra, Bhagvadgita, including itself. So that kalilam, that delusion has to go. And that is the most important aspect of somebody's seeking towards knowing what that highest knowledge is. Whatever has to be heard and whatever have been heard, you will transcend it. Shrotavasya shrutasya cha. When the intellect is devoid of this kalilam, the individual attains nirvedam. That's the meaning of that verse. So if you read that verse again, it says, Yadate moha kalilam buddhir vyati tarishyati tadagantasi nirvedam shrotavasya shrutasya cha. That kalilam is a very important word in this verse. Then, Shruti viprattipanna te yada sthasyati nischala samadhavachala buddhistada yogama vapsyasi. What is the meaning of that? And then next question Arjuna asks is, okay. Sorry, I missed that slide. So Krishna also mentions that when your mind becomes confused by listening to the various methods of life described in the Shruti. Now, as all of you know, that Shruti, the Vedas have a Purva Bhag, which is describing the karma kata, the rituals or the method of life, how you live in this life. You may get confused by that. And I think most of the people do get confused. But if you abide in the Atma, the real, and remain achala, without doubt, nischala, and without error, tada, then avapsyasi, you will attain yoga. Your goal is the highest and no more interested in the small worldly goal. What is that highest goal? The spiritual goal, the state of samadhi to attain that which is the highest. You can call it God, Brahman, or whatever. Now Arjuna asks another question. How do one know he's progressing towards this? Is becoming equanimous, or the word comes sthit prajna. So the next verse goes, and Arjuna is asking a question. Arjuna, uvacha, sthit prajnasya ka bhasha, samadhistasya keshava, sthidhi kim prabhaseta kimasit vrajet kim. It means, how would you define one with the stabilized wisdom? So the stabilized wisdom is sthit prajna, who is in samadhi, or when he is active or engages in the world, how does he sit or talk, and how does he move about? Now this word sthit prajna is a beautiful word, which means stabilized wisdom. An enlightened person has two states, and it was very well described for Ramakrishna, that when he was active, but he was always in a state of samadhi all the time. Although he used to go bhava samadhi, he used to go lose complete attachment to the world. He used to go in a complete kind of, he used to become completely limp in certain situation. And I think most of you will know that the first time he went into samadhi, when he saw just a flock of swans flowing, he saw them across the blue sky, and he went into samadhi. One being active for external world. So an enlightened person has two states, one which is active, and this state is called a vyutthana. And one is being in samadhi, which is inward, or abide in his real self, which is called a samadhista. That jnani who is able to discover himself and is convinced about the teaching, he is a karma yogi and is a samadhist. He knows his true nature. There is another name given to it, which is sthita prajna. So Arjuna is asking how an enlightened person feels from within. And Krishna has described such a person. And he's also asking Krishna, hey Krishna, tell me, that person whose dhi has become sthira, his mind has become sthira, how does that person behave? How does that person react? So, sthit pragnasya ka bhasha. Here, bhasa means, what is his description? Kim prabhaset, how he communicates. Kimasita, how he sits. Vrajeta kim, how he moves around. He wants to know how a jnani conducts himself, what is the state of his mind, and how he transacts with people. And these are called as the sthit prajnasya lakshanani. Lakshanam means the characteristics of a sthit prajna. Now, through shravanam and mananam, we get prajna. But we are still not reached the state of sthit prajna. And what do you have to do for that? Nididhyasanam. By doing nididhyasanam, you are practicing what you have done in the process of shravanam and mananam. And this prajna, this state of jnana, has to convert itself into a sthita prajna, where the wisdom has become stable. In the next verse, Krishna explains, Prajahati yada kaman sarvan partah manogatam atmanyeva atmanah tushtah sthit prajnast ast chate. The Lord answered, O Arjuna, satisfied in himself by himself. When one gives up all the desired attaining in the mind, then he has said to be of firm knowledge. So Krishna says, Prajahati, when a person gives up sarvan kaman, all desires, manogatan, obtaining in the mind, he is atmanyeva atmanah tushta. It's a very important line. A jnani who is happy within himself, for he is self-sufficient. His physical needs are meager, but his emotional needs are completely gone, nil. But that doesn't mean that he's become dispassionate. He's full of, his attitude is full of love and compassion to all. So a jnani doesn't become detached from people. That doesn't mean that he's become completely inert. He's full of love and compassion, but he is not, his emotional quotient is extremely high. Probably he doesn't have a limit of that. So once he is Atmaneva Atmana Tushtaha, what is his natural consequence? He's not afflicted by any worldly desire or things. So the worldly desire is not going to affect him because that's his natural consequence. And then Krishna also says, Dukkheshu anudvigmana sukheshu vigataspraha vitrag bhayakroda muni istadhi uchyate. The mind of a jnani is free from craving and its pleasures, is unperturbed in trouble, and who is free from attachment of fear and anger. He is said to be a sage of firm knowledge. How does a jnani respond to situations in life? A jnani is a karmi yogi. He does not incur papa and punya. And Krishna described this person anidvignamana. He is emotionally strong and insulated due to godliness. Dukkheshu anudvigmana sukheshu vigadaspraha vitrag bhayakroda muni stitidi uchyate. Sukheshu vigadaspraha means not carried away by a favorable condition. Vigadaspraha, he's dispassionate, he's balanced, and in short, vitarag bhayakroda, he's vita. Vita means he's free from these basic emotional problems, which are also called the Shadvikaras, Kama, Krodha, Lobha, Moha, Mada, Matsarya, are under his control. This means he's free from samsara. His dhi is stable. Stitadhi muni uchyate. Intellectually very sound, as his knowledge is now converted into an emotional strength. Now, Krishna talks about the sadhanas. And here he is comparing a jnani with a tortoise. Yada sangharate cha ayam kurmah angani eve sarvasha. Indriyani inde arthebhya tasya prajna pratishtita. Moreover, when he is completely withdrawing the sense organs from the sense object, just as a tortoise withdraws his limbs when in danger, then his knowledge has become firm. So Krishna is discussing another topic here, and that is Sthit Prajna Sadhanani. What are the sadhanas to be practiced to become a Sthit Prajna? And Krishna advises about the sadhana. How to change the jnana into practice is the topic discussed, which is the nididhyasanam part. So what do you mean by nididhyasanam? Internalization of the knowledge obtained through Guru Shastra Upadesha. And here two more important things. Indriya Nigraha, regulation of the sense organs, control the sense organs after obtaining the knowledge. Initially, this process is difficult, but it can be attained with practice. Abhyasena tu kaunteya vairagyena cha grahiyate. Krishna is talking about how vairagya helps you. Then he becomes manonigraha, control of thought process, which is described by Patanjali in the second sutra in the Samadhipada, Yogascha Chitta Vritti Nirodha, controlling the extended thoughts requires, and this requires meditation. So Sthit Prajna does not need any sensory regulation. Prajna is a new plant and it requires some protection. We are in the state of Prajna and we get very easily misled even now, despite maybe reading Bhagvadgita twice or thrice. To control the senses, Krishna gives an example. Kurmaha angani samharate. Kurma is a tortoise. Samharate withdraws its 5 limbs. Sarvasaha, from all the 5 directions. Similarly, a prajna withdraws the sense organs from the sense object judicially and intelligently. Yaha indriyani indriyarthrebhya. His knowledge becomes stable. Now, some more advice comes from Krishna. Tani sarvani samyakta yukta asita matparaha. Vashehi yasya indriyani tasya prajna pratishtita. Having restrained all those sense organs, the self-control should remain committed to my pursuit. There is a direct advice from Krishna. My pursuit, because the knowledge of that person whose sense organs are under control becomes firm. Then comes the 71 verse, which says, Vihaya kaman yah sarvan puman charita nispraha nirmamaha nirankaraha saha shantima digacchati. having given up all sense object, that person who moves without craving and without the notion of I and mine enjoys the peace. And Krishna's last exposition in the chapter of Sankhya Yoga, Esham Brahmi Sthiti Partha, Enam Prapina Vimuhyati Antakale Api Asyam Sthitva Brahma Nirvanam Rishyati. O Arjuna, this is called Brahmi Sthiti. Having attained this, one is not deluded. Being established in this, even at the time of the death, he attains oneness with Brahman. So in conclusion, Krishna says, without the study of Vedanta, which gives Atma Jnanam, one cannot attain this state of mind, which is called Sthita Prajna. And this state of mind is Brahmi Sthiti. Enam prapya na vimuhyati. Once a person attains this state of mind, thereafter there is no fall back into samsara. Once his prarabdha is exhausted at the time of death, what will happen to him? Brahma nirvanam ichyati. He will attain videha mukti or merge into Param Brahma. Hari Om Tat Sat. So here I will stop sharing, and I think with this we complete most of the second chapter, including with Dr. Netra's and Dr. Sundar's expositions. I'll stop sharing my slides and we will take questions. Dr. Hegde is there.
Kindly unmute yourself and ask the questions. Dr. Hegde, would you like to say something? I just saw Dr. Hegde. Dr. Hegde?